welcome to the 8th edition of IMC. Today we have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Rajesh Rao, Regional Vice President, Sales, Asia Pacific South for VIAVI Solution. So let's talk to him. So Rajesh, can you walk us through the key TNM solution VIAVI is showcasing at the IMC this year?
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here at IMC. It's a very prestigious event. And, VIAVI is core strengths are in fiber and 5G, right? In fact, last year was our 100th year anniversary. We've always been at the forefront of transport technology and fiber that has come along with it, right, for over 100 years, as well as in RF and wireless. So that's essentially the theme. And when we talk about fiber and 5G or wireless, that's what we really focused on here. But not only 5G, we are looking at the next technology as well, right? So we've got focus on 6G, on security, on the evolving 5G around NTN, all right? So what we have on display here at our booth is, for example, our fiber solutions that are required for monitoring fiber networks, for example, right? So when you have a data center explosion in India, where it's 1.5 billion population, data hungry, right, and huge appetite for data consumption. That's going to put enormous stress on the telecom networks as well as the datacom networks, right? So fiber is an essential element. So we, for example, monitor over 1 million kilometers of fiber in India. There's almost 2 or 3 trips to the moon, right? And that is on display here today with our fiber monitoring, not only in terms of reactive, but also proactive maintenance and monetization of the fiber assets, right? So we've really evolved that product. That's on display. We've also got, 5G Open RAN. And with 5G, you get a disaggregated network, which is very different from 4G. So you've got components like the RU, the DU, the CU, the core, rig test, right? So we actually test each and every component of the network in 5G in the Open RAN network. In the lab as well as in the field, right? And from assurance to monetization. So that's on display here. We've also got the next 3GPP release 17 and 18, which takes 5G and merges that with satellite communications, what we call as NTN. Yeah. So that is on display as well. Our TM500 UE simulator is a gold standard. And in NTN, it's very difficult because you have UEs that are mobile and satellites that are moving, right? You've got to test for Doppler shift and delay, etc. So we have that on display. We also have network security, right? We have an extensive portfolio called the VIAVI Nitro Wireless Security Portfolio, Open RAN Security Portfolio. So that's on display. And 6G, right? 6G is the next generation of technology. So we are talking of how AI and ML models come to bear on top of 5G, and then 6G comes across. So we have a research organization that is working on all neural receivers, right? We've got some very interesting, innovative piece of technology that we call the RAN specific model generators, which is unique to us. It's an all photonics network, right? And that's also on display here.
So Rajesh, my next question is related to NTN, the non-terrestrial networks. They play a crucial role in enhancing global communication. Can you brief us about their role, especially to remote and underserved areas? And how can operators ensure reliability, stability, and performance of NTN networks?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, when you look at 5G, the next release of 5G 17, which is now in 18, essentially talks about satellite communications. So as a user, the aim of that is to make sure there is ubiquitous coverage 360 degrees around the world. So if you're on a terrestrial network, you're in the cities, you have 5G coverage. Suppose you go hiking, or you're in an aircraft, or you're out in the seas. You need to make sure that connectivity is ubiquitous, right? So NTN brings that to bear. So we actually have tools that take it from 5G to NTN, things like our UE simulator. So we simulate for things like Doppler effect, right? Delays that happen between the satellite and the terrestrial network. So all these are very critical. Otherwise, you'll never get a stable network available to the people, right? So we make sure we test for these things in the lab. So they're foolproof. And then we go from lab into field for deployment as well as assurance, right? So we also have things like our, resilient network timing, for example, right? Navigation and timing, resilient network. So we've got on display here that basically takes many timing sources across many orbits, right? So you look at LEO, GEO, and MEO satellite signals, right? And today, with all the geopolitical issues, you've got GPS jamming and spoofing that is happening. So how do you ensure you have a reliable network, to your point, right? If on the border areas, you have GPS jamming and spoofing happening. So you need to make sure that the continuous communications is available. So we have a PNT solution, which essentially holds these timing information for 24 hours or beyond, so that even if GPS signal is lost, you can provide timing to make sure the networks are running more efficiently. So that talks about resilience of networks, right? So we bring all that to bear in NTN, right? From lab to field. Sure.
Okay. Rajesh, my next question is related to 6G. 6G has the potential to transform industry significantly. What upcoming advances in 6G can we expect to see, and what solution VIAVI has under this shelf, or any innovation VIAVI is working on?
Sure, absolutely. So, in 5G, UE simulator is a gold standard, right, for basically generating UEs and thousands of UEs or devices to test the network. In 6G, we bring to bear, the 6G as a technology brings to bear the AI and ML models, right? And that really evolves 5G into 6G, okay? So, for example, we have a research organization inside VIAVI, okay, which dates back to the Marconi era, several years or decades ago, right? So we are working, for example, how do we look at AI ML based neural receiver? So it's about neural networks, right? So it's the brain that is, in the 6G networks, which today is not there in 5G, right? Not only about dynamic bandwidth allocation, energy savings, capacity almost doubles or triples, all that is fine. But to think about, neural sensing and an all photonics network, right? And that's going to come about in 6G. It's pretty revolutionary, right? Things like how are beams designed? For example, how do you sense networks? So you can look at in 6G, okay, what are the topology of the area? You've got tall buildings, short buildings, and based on that sensing, you can actually create a digital twin network, right? And create certain beams and patterns and etc. before you actually deploy that in the live network. So all this comes about in 6G in a big way, okay? And you've already heard about AI, which is all software. And eventually, we have GPUs today with high processing, but you think about quantum computing, all right? So quantum computing is going to be a big thing in the future, right? So that you can really process huge amounts of data. So we are also there as part of 6G, things like how do you build quantum safe networks, right? So when you're building quantum safe networks, you need to test for things like QKD, PQC that we do today, right? Quantum cryptography. So it's good to know that I think VIAVI is right here today with things like quantum technology as well as 6G in the future with neural networks and signaling sensing that is happening in the area.
Rajesh, would you like to explain us about how AI and ML, machine learning, being integrated in test and measurement processes?
Yes, sure. Absolutely. I think VIAVI, as VIAVI stands, the first three alphabets of VIAVI, VIA, is a path. And the next two alphabets, VI, is for visibility. So as a company with our test and measurement products, our job is to extract data, right? Visibility from the network. So you think about this in the digital era, and especially in India, in the digital India with 1.5 billion population, the appetite for data is just enormous. So to make meaning or meaningful decisions based on their data, we need to start looking at AI and ML built into our test equipment, right? In fact, we recently acquired a company about a year ago in India for AI Ops, which is based out of Chennai. We actually build all that AI into our products as well as our customer networks, right? So that is what we do. So in 6G and 5G, we will see a lot more intelligence that is built as part of these. So when we have, for example, predictive, right? So you have huge amounts of fiber data in your network. So we collect all this fiber data. How many times as a particular fault, for example, happened in a particular section of the network? And can we actually start predicting that by a certain time, that particular network is going to have a fault or the loss is going to degrade over time? And that predictability is really building this AI and ML algorithms in our software for these products and being more predictive and judgment-based decisions that can be taken. So we are building that in many of our tools as well as our systems.
Rajesh, my next question is related to security. What challenges have AI and ML has given to the network connectivity? Because as we are moving towards 6G and AI ML are integrated part of it. So what challenges are we seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. In 5G, it's very interesting. The democratization of the network has happened. So you've got different components. In 4G, we never had that, right? You had a base station where you had the RU and the DU in one unit. Today, you're talking of RU, a DU, a CU, you got RIC, you got the core, right? So it's all different. And you want to have different combinations, right? You want to have the RU work with 3 different DU vendors or vice versa, etc. So what's one of the biggest risks in that is, number one is the interoperability between these. So testing becomes critical. But also, it's also vulnerability because each of these can be single points of failure from a security perspective. So VIAVI has got the VIAVI Open RAN network security platform, where we look at not only RAN security, core security, but the edge security, right? Things like SASE, SCAS, right? We do all of that stuff. In fact, port by port security also we are involved with, right? So we've got an extensive network security portfolio. When we look at making quantum safe networks, right? I mean, quantum processing is still far away, maybe 10 years or even longer. But the adjacent technologies for quantum is happening today, right? Things like QKD and PQC, people are already starting building this, right? Things like financial networks, right? You've got to make sure that they cannot be hacked and is safe. So VIAVI does QKD and PQC, not only at layer 1, but even at layer 7, where we create tunnels and have data traffic to check the robustness of that particular QKD and PQC setup.
Great, that is great. With the growing demand of advanced monitoring and sensing solution across various sectors, how does fiber sensing contribute and what are key drivers behind its adoption?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's very exciting even more in India because of the infrastructure build, right? There's enormous amount of infrastructure. And even globally, that happens. And I guess the world isn't a very safe place at this moment, right? With all the geopolitical issues. So what that means is there's going to be continuous infrastructure that's going to be built because many things fall down and you've got to build that up. So with that comes the need for things like highways and bridges and, the physical infrastructure that needs to be built. But you also have, things like global warming with excessive heat or rain that comes in. With that comes issues like soil erosion, right? Landslides that happen. I think even in India, it doesn't happen. Yeah. So you have these kind of scenarios that are there. Now, with sensing, you are able to understand what is the topology changes that are happening in some of these landscapes. So, for example, if you lay fiber across a hill, and over time, you can actually see if there's any changes happening in that. So you can actually sense through fiber what are the infrastructure related changes and damages that are occurring. So VIAVI does that, right? And we do that across many different segments. For example, in oil and gas for pipelines. So if there's a gas leak or oil leak, if you lay fiber across these pipelines, it can sense those changes. So we do that as a coverage. You look at utility networks, right? Power transmission. If there is a heating effect, that's one of the common problems. We can actually do temperature sensing, right? For that. If, for example, in India, we're talking of Kavach and I think Project Gajraj, where elephants are crossing. So you want to be able to sense acoustically along railway lines, for example, right? So we do acoustic sensing as well. So sensing is becoming very, very important. And the good news for VIAVI from our unique proposition is we've been in the fiber business for, like I said, for several decades, right? So for us, it's an extension of fiber technology from a monitoring standpoint to sensing. So we cover monitoring to sensing, end-to-end is covered, whether it's acoustic, temperature, or strain.
Rajesh, my last question is, how does VIAVI align itself with India's mission of Digital Bharat? Or how VIAVI is contributing towards this mission?
Yes. So, Digital India, it's amazing to see the amount of transformation that is going on in the country, right? And I think it's a poster child in terms of, for a size of this population, to see the amount of digital tools, digital currency, and all of that is being used. So what that all means is it's the use of data really drives the need for network capacity, because all the data has to be processed. Network resiliency, a topic that you had talked about earlier. And VIAVI is here in India. In fact, we are developing and designing some of our tools in India, right, with software engineers, etc., to develop these and contributing to the development of our products meant for some of these digital infrastructure. So, for example, data centers. There are hyperscalers in India. You look at Amazon, Google, Microsoft. There are a tremendous number of data centers coming up. The ability, the robustness of these data centers also depend on the quality of the fiber that goes into the data centers. So with some of our fiber solutions, like our fiber monitoring, remember I said we have a huge presence of our fiber monitoring. Some of that development of components of that fiber, whether it be in software, is being done in India. So that is our contribution to it, right? And the way I see it is, our job is to enable a digital India. And what that really means is, if you need safe, secure, robust, resilient networks, be it fiber or 5G, which is essential for digital India, they have to be tested.
Yeah.
They just have to be tested. Whether they are tested in the lab first, made sure that they are robust, then you go into the field, that has to be tested, or even before that, the manufacturing, right? And then during the assurance phase. So that is our contribution, really, is to enable a digital India through the design in the labs, through the deployment, right, to the assurance, as well as monetization, right? Across fiber, across wireless. These are the two components. And also, apart from that, in things like semiconductor space, right? India is now talking big in terms of semiconductor industry. We're talking about fabs being here, chip design that is coming about, packaging, etc. So we play a significant role with many of the chip companies, right, with respect to testing for various chip technologies, including areas like silicon photonics and eventually quantum as well, right? That's where this is our contribution for Digital India.
Thank you, Rajesh, for this insightful conversation. It's been a pleasure learning about VIAVI solution and its contribution towards India's digital mission. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be talking to you.